Hi, everyone. I want to take some time now to kind of review and go through your last assignment, assignment 12. This was the very first time you probably dealt with breaking everything up into modules. And so I expect that you probably had a little bit of issues in understanding. The goal for this particular assignment was to kind of just get you doing it. If you did run into some issues, I wouldn't fret over that right now. I wouldn't worry about that right now. I would just learn from it right now. So let's go through this program together and this solution and learn from this and then apply it to the very next one that you're going to be doing for the upcoming week. Okay? So what you were to do was to take an older assignment, the Bob's Pretzels assignment, okay, and kind of modulize it, okay? Not kind of, but modulize it. And in doing so, we wanted to kind of walk through the different steps of doing that. So in this case here, we had Bob's Pretzels. And for the most part, we were doing some calculations to resolve what the customer will owe based upon how many pretzels they buy with cheese and without cheese. Then also accumulate daily totals, okay? So one of the first things you should really do when you get a problem like this, and now we're in modularization, is to look at the structure chart and really start thinking through how you want to go about doing something. And so in doing so, the very first thing I would do is, once again, identify the inputs and the outputs. If we go back to the design document I gave you way back in week 2, I believe, we talked about the first thing you do is do the inputs and the outputs. After you get those done and you get everything in logical order, okay, the next step used to be, okay, I would probably get all the assumptions out of the way. I would do all that kind of stuff. But instead of diving into the pseudocode, we're going to go look at the structure chart and try to lay out a structure chart based upon what it is we want to be doing. Per my videos I've told you before, how do we go about doing that? Let's walk through that one more time. So in this case here, I had inputs at pretzels and pretzels with cheese. For my outputs, I had my total sale for the order for the particular customer, and then accumulating these daily totals. So I have my inputs and my outputs. This right here should really give us enough basis to really determine how I want to break down my programs based upon really the outputs. It's not going to tell me everything, but it's going to give me a really good start. What do I mean by that? So if I sit back and I kind of look at my structure chart, as I have mentioned before, the very first thing you should do is create a main routine. This main routine is going to be the button click, the main event that happens in our program. If we have input that we need to validate, okay, meaning we have text boxes or combo boxes or certain things that need to be validated based upon what the user is going to provide to us, we need to then consider getting and validating our input, okay? And in this case, for this particular situation, we had 2 inputs, and those inputs were going to be text boxes, okay? If they were going to be radio buttons or check boxes, I wouldn't have to validate those. And so with that, I may not have this section. But since I do have data that is going to be free form and needs to be input correctly, needs to be numeric, and needs to be of 0 or above, I need to validate. So with that, I'm going to do get and validate inputs. The next thing I need to consider as my first level here is always doing my calculations. In this case, I called it calculate customer total. And finally, display. So I'm going to display anything back. I need to have a display there. Quit hitting my button's wrong here, okay? And so I would always start here with this. With that said, my next question would be, and again, I would get this from what is it I'm going to be validating from my inputs? In this case, I'm going to be validating these 2 pretzels and pretzels with cheese. And so I very simply say, I'm going to validate this, and I'm going to validate that, these 2. So again, identifying your inputs and identifying your outputs is a very good start here. This takes care of us in identifying our inputs. Hopefully that makes sense. Our next piece here is then gets into, well, then how do I break down my modules based upon my output? Well, I would start with each one of the outputs. I contend that if you did your modules correctly and you're dealing things you're writing your modules, I should say, with one purpose, each one of these should have its own procedure in what it's actually doing. So that's exactly kind of what I did in my case here. I kind of did a little bit different. You'll kind of see. So right off the bat, I'm going to do calculate customer total. That's what's going to be called from my main routine. And it's going to call calculate total sale. That's one of my outputs. Then what I decided to do, and that's the key word here, what I decided to do, okay, so basically there's some flexibility here, is I'm going to call a procedure that's going to say, this is going to be calculate daily totals. I wanted to create a module that basically said, in this module, I'm controlling calculating the daily totals, each one of them. Does that make sense? So in this case here, I'm just going to calculate the daily totals, but what this is going to do is not do nothing more than call calculate daily pretzels with cheese, and calculate daily total sales. And then finally, my display. And so in a way, once again, if I look at my outputs, these four, I should probably have a module for each one of these four. Then it's really up to me, more free form, and how I want to kind of organize it. Just same thing as a book. I could have very easily just called calculate total sales, calculate total pretzels, daily pretzels with cheese, and daily total sales from my calculate total customer total, and it would have worked fine, and it'd probably be fine. I decided I wanted to give it one more level of a section for the no more than really explaining what I'm doing to the next programmer who takes over my program. But again, that is my, we must say, artistic flair to it. You may have something different. As long as it makes sense, it's not wrong. There is some flexibility here in how you design your modules when you write your program. You really can't be wrong, and I contend that every one of you may have done this a little bit differently. There's not a lot of flexibility with this one, but some of the ones that are coming up, you may do them differently, and that's perfectly fine as long as it makes sense. That's why, once again, there's a lot of textbooks out there, and people write them differently. Authors have their own styles, and it's the same thing with writing programs. My style is to utilize modules sometimes to describe overall what I'm trying to do. Does that make sense? And that's why I had that there. Okay? So with that said, once again, as we talked about in the videos for last week, based upon this, your problem, or this previous week before you started this problem, this right here now reflects what my program should look like in regards to, for every box I have on this particular structure chart, I should now have a procedure in my program that actually meets it, meaning it's a one-to-one correlation in this case, okay? The next thing I would do is I would then go ahead, and really all I did in this case was modularize, sectionalize, however you wanted to do it, what it is each one of those boxes are going to do. So get and validate inputs, once again, you don't need to write the pseudocode for get and validate inputs. I think it causes more confusion than it needs to. And so with that said, just tell me what you're doing, and that's what this is going to be doing. We know there's going to be code in there. But I'm going to calculate customer total, and it's going to call calculate total sale, and it's going to do this piece of logic. So this was from, I basically had this logic from my original program back in week 4, and all I did, I said, is I'm going to do this in this box. I calculate daily totals. I'm going to increment my daily totals, my daily total pretzels. I'm going to increment my daily total pretzels with cheese, or accumulate, I should say, for each one of those, and I'm going to accumulate my daily total sales. Pretty simple. I know it's not a real heavy program, and so I didn't want to start off with a heavy program. I wanted you to try to understand this a little bit in what we're doing. All right? Does that make sense? So I just basically kind of did this and said, okay, I kind of designed these boxes. I kind of designed this structure chart. What's going to go in each one of those? And that's what I meant here. Obviously, you see calculate daily totals. I didn't put anything there. Really, what I'm saying is I'm going to call this one and call this one and call this one. This is my way of me saying that. Let's calculate customer total. And I'm going to call this one and call this one, if that makes sense. All right? I hope it does. I hope it does, okay? One other thing we need to notice here, once again, before we think about modules, is how would we define our variables, scope-wise. And from the scope point of view, I would, if it was going to be local before we started modularizing, it would be local now. So in this case here, everything that was going to be local remains local. Everything that was going to be class will remain class. Those will not change. So class level variables will be there for accumulating the total sales. I still need to keep them in memory after the submit button, so it will stay as class. And we want to make sure our program reflects that. Okay, does that make sense? So now I have the whole thing designed. I kind of know what I want to do. Now let's go over and look at the program. So in this case here, as you can see, I still kept these as class level variables. This is kind of interesting what this problem actually had to do. And it maybe confuse you a little bit on how to deal with it from passing data. Remember what class level variables are. These are variables that do two things. Number one, they stay in memory throughout the life of the program. In this case, our program has one form, so as long as the form is up, they're in memory. As soon as we close the form, it's gone. Hopefully you recognize what I'm saying there, because later on, and we're going to get into multiple form programs, and so all of a sudden class level variables get a little different. But with that cases, right now our programs are one form, so basically when the program ends, they're gone. Also with class level variables, what's unique about class level variables is that you can utilize and access these variables in any procedure within your program. So now that I'm splitting those up, I can access them in any one of those procedures. So that provides a lot more flexibility to my program. You might ask, well, then why do I need to pass data in any case? But we still want to manage the resources as effectively as possible. So if they were supposed to be class before, they should be class now. But if they were supposed to be local before, they need to remain local, because I don't want memory, memory taken up for no apparent reason. And so if I move these out there as class level variables, they will stay in memory after the submit button is complete. And we do not want that. We want everything to remain the same. I hope that makes sense. But because these are class level variables, I don't pass them. All I need to do is access them. I'm sure you may have had a little issue with that, maybe not. But if you did, once again, I hope this kind of clears it up. Let me show you how this all works then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass down INT pretzels with cheese, and Boolean validated to get and validate input. These two will be empty, okay? Just like we did before. These were, if you followed my videos before, these two will be empty. We're going to fill those up with valid data, hopefully, okay? And if it is valid, we'll recognize that my Boolean validated that I'm passing down as a true. But if they're not valid, I'll set this to false, and we'll stop all processing. Once that's done, we basically calculate the customer total. This is what I said I was going to do. So let's go down here. Here's my validation code. All right, very similar to what I had before in my previous examples. Hopefully yours sort of looks like this. Okay. Then we'll get down to calculate customer total. So calculate customer total based upon my structure chart here is going to calculate total sales and calculate total daily totals. And with that, the first thing, calculate total sales, I'm going to pass down pretzels and pretzels with cheese. Now, let's talk about how I received that data. In this case, I received it by val, because all I'm going to do is read these. These are now inputs. They've already been populated based upon my get and validate, okay? But my total sale, I'm going to change. The DBL total sale is what I'm actually calculating. So thus I'm going to change it. Therefore, I'm going to receive it by ref. Does that make sense? Usually that's the first thing people have a little bit of confusion on is which way do I receive things. If you're going to change the variable, literally change the contents in the variable, you must receive it by ref. If you're just going to read the contents, you receive it by val. All right? Please distinguish that. So in this case here, calculate total sale. I'm going to pass down pretzels with cheese, and the total sales. And what I'm going to do in this case here, by val, once again, by val and by ref. And as you can see, I'm taking DBL total sales, I'm changing it. I'm going to multiply 2.50 times pretzels plus pretzels with cheese times 5. So whatever they ordered, I'm going to do that accordingly. Yes, I do not have these as constants. They can be constants, of course. And if they're constants, you don't pass them. Once again, constants should be a class level thing. And then so though you can access those constants anywhere within the program. Okay? So if you have constants in your program, that's perfectly fine. If you had like pretzels costs and pretzels with cheese costs, no problem. Just make sure they're class level, but they do not need to be passed because class level variables can be accessed in any procedure within the program. Does that make sense? Calculate daily totals. Watch how this works now. So calculate daily totals. I'm going to pass down the pretzels, pretzels with cheese, and the DP total sale. I'm not changing any of those, so I received those by val, by val, by val. Look at the difference there. This was by ref because I changed it, but this is by val because now I'm going to just read it. Does that make sense? Even though they're real close together here, once I'm done with this one, I already got the total. All I'm going to do is pass it down again, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to call calculate daily pretzels, and as you see here, I'm going to take the class level variable int daily pretzels and add the pretzels right here. Receive it by val. Same thing with cheese and same thing with total sale. My final piece is I'm going to receive my DBO total sale as my displays. Okay, let's go back up here, display totals. And I call that, and there it is right there. I'm only passing the one down because once again, the other three are my daily totals. And with that, those are class level variables. So thus I can just read them. I don't need to pass them. Like I said, if that's a little confusing and you got a little confused on your problem with that, that's how this works. Hopefully that kind of cleared it up a little bit for you. All right. So hopefully with all that said, I still have my clear, my exit right there. Hopefully with all that said, you get the idea of how this whole thing now works. And see if I can bring this up. And we'll test it here real quick with 2 and 2. And I submit, and there you go, $15. And right there, next customer comes up and they want, let's see, we'll clear this up, 3 and 3. And you can see I'm accumulating still, and there's my customer sale. And there you go. And that's how this problem should have been written based upon everything we talked about for this week. So once again, pay special attention to how I created my structure chart. I created my design. I kept the integrity of the scope when it came to my variables. I passed my data accordingly. Obviously, everything in my get and validate, I'm receiving by ref because I am changing those values potentially, okay? And then when I get down my customers, I receive them by val, I'm only reading them, and my totals by ref. But once I got everything done, I received even my next one, like this one right here, DBL total sale, was simply by val because all I'm doing is now reading it. So take a look at that, see if that makes sense. If not, contact your instructor. Make sure you can you have a good sense of what's going on. If you didn't do so well in your first attempt of that, once again, it's practice. Don't get worried about that. Just try to take what you learned here and your effort from the last one and apply it to the next one. We're going to practice these throughout the rest of this semester to make sure you get pretty good at taking your programs and modularizing them and passing data. My final thing to say to you is sometimes students look at this and they're a little bit tired. We're getting close to the end of the semester. And they go, oh God, okay, I don't know how to pass stuff, or I'm not getting it. I'll make everything class level variables and it'll work, but whatever. Don't do that. Learn how to do this, okay? Try to find some energy. I know you might be down to a quarter tank of gas left in this semester, but try to find a little bit of energy and learn this because it's going to apply to every program you write from now on, really throughout your career, okay?